I'm 30 and I don't have any friends, but that's okay. So if you watch this video, you know that I made a friend at age 16, and that friend turned out to be a nightmare. But let's rewind a little to my primary, middle, and upper school days, and why it was so hard for me to make friends. Growing up, I lived in a household where you were taught to be seen and not heard. So I was very reclusive and very reserved, which meant that I was slow at picking up on social cues. And this comes back to bite me a few times. So back in primary school, I was actually part of a friend group. Let's call them Suki, Aya, Shay, and Yan. We were all somehow the same ethnicity, so naturally we flocked together. Shay was like the leader of the group. She was smart for her age, and everybody looked up to her for any decisions. I was especially in admiration of her and wanted to follow in her exact footsteps because I just had such little interaction at home being the eldest. Meanwhile, Shay had a bunch of older sisters, so it felt like she was more exposed to things than I was, and I wanted to learn from her. Then there was Aya and Yan. These guys were inseparable. Aya would be the one everybody teased, but she would also tease back, whereas Yan was a very girly girl. And I could tell this girl, she did not like me, okay? And only tolerated me because I was already part of the group before she came along. And then there was Suki, who was very much a chaotic tomboy, and that's because she grew up with 4 brothers. She would always be the one making everybody laugh. She actually became my best friend. So to give you better context, when I was 16, I became part of a trio with Suki and she who shall not be named. And then when it was time to go to university, these two ended up falling out. But then when it was our early 20s, I reunited them back together until eventually she who shall not be named was exiled. But anyways, going back to before all of that, when I was still in this group, we got on really well. And that went on for the whole duration of primary school and the first half of middle school. I will never forget this day. It was the last day of year 6. I got pulled into the girls' bathroom by the group. All of them were stood in front of me and Shay was speaking. And she said, "We don't want to be friends with you anymore." No clue how long they were thinking this way, but it was obviously for a while because they purposely waited and told me the day before summer break. And as an 11-year-old kid who didn't have a healthy home environment, my friends were my entire world. And all it took was that single moment for my world to be shattered. Now, although Shay was leading the conversation, I do have my suspicions that Yan was actually the one who instigated. The reason for this friendship breakup was down to a number of reasons. One of them was because sometimes I would copy the girls' behavior patterns in an attempt to not make my delays with catching up to social cues too obvious. My financial situation at home was pretty bad, so I couldn't afford to keep up with trends, nor could I keep up with the shows that they were watching because everything was on cable TV and we couldn't afford that. So when they were talking about particular shows and movies, I'd be the only one who was silent the entire time. My looks, it didn't help either. I couldn't afford to go get a nice haircut and have layered hair or bangs. My mother would force my hair into a high ponytail when the other girls would be experimenting with makeup. I didn't even have lip balm, so my lips would constantly be cracked. And for the final nail in the coffin, all the other girls were light to medium skin tones, and I was the only one who is dark skinned. And if you know anything about colorism, it literally just puts a big target on your back. Anyways, the summer went by and I wish it had never ended because when it was time to begin year 7, that was when the reputation Larry Beana was born. In case you don't know what Larry means, Larry is a meaner way of saying loner in the UK. So every group project, every PE class, every lunch break, I was alone. And this briefly stopped in year 8. And I remember during this time period of my life, I became more and more withdrawn and had this overwhelming urge to just disappear. And just when I had gotten used to the loneliness, almost at the end of year 7, the group started being friendly to me again. And they said, "Hey, I forgot why we broke up with you." All of my suffering was made to feel like it had been done for nothing. I was honestly in shock when I heard that, but at the time, I felt like I had no choice but to brush it off because I knew what it was like to survive school with friends and without friends. So I grabbed hold of the rope. However, it wasn't until halfway through year 8, Shay, the leader, changed her mind and said, "I don't want to hang out with you anymore." And I was back to being alone again. And at this point, I had no hope. I had no hope that I would ever make friends. And that was how I spent my entire upper school experience, by myself. It got to a point where I was so used to the loneliness, I didn't even allow myself to have a daydream about having a best friend because I just thought it wasn't in the cards for me. And this definitely took its toll on me. I was deeply insecure. I would avoid mirrors and cameras at all costs because I genuinely used to look in the mirror and view myself as a disgusting monster that repelled everyone around them. However, things changed unexpectedly when I entered sixth form, which is an additional education in the UK where you do it from 16 to 18. And this was a time period where I connected with Suki and someone else too. And it was really odd. I never expected to reconnect with Suki because all that time ago, during our first friendship breakup back in those toilets, when I was there crying, Suki was making everyone laugh. Now, of course, we were young, and during upper school, when we would pass by each other in the corridors, she would politely smile at me, but that was it. And in our sixth form lessons, we naturally just ended up chatting and found out we had the same interests, like second gen K-pop. SHINee was our favorite group. We also enjoyed shoujo anime like The Wallflower, and also gaming. We loved murder and prop hunt. And yeah, we became best friends really fast, and we were basically by each other's sides for the entirety of our 20s. Because of her, I was able to feel more confident about myself, was stronger at socializing, and also helped me to understand who I was without having to put myself down. We would always have this routine where every Friday we would go out for a cheeky takeaway and eat in the car. Every other day we would randomly call each other just to talk about nothing, and we even went on our first girls trip not that long ago. However, as time passes, things change, and I guess I was a little naive thinking that it wouldn't. Suki got into a relationship and things have significantly shifted between us. There'll be times when I ring her and she'll say, "Sorry, I can't pick up the phone right now. I'm on the phone with him." If I'm on the phone with her, she'll cut the call because he's ringing her. On my birthday, she spent that week with him, and she did try and make it up to me a month later, and when she did, she just spoke about her and him. When I don't hear anything from her, I'll be checking on her, but I won't get the same back. Suki has been there for me so many times throughout my life, so in actuality, it's really hard to hold any of this against her, especially since I know who she is as a person. She would never try to consciously harm me, and I definitely hold some accountability too, because I've never found the opportunity to have an open conversation with her about all this, because I don't want her to feel like she can't ever talk about that part of her life with me. But it is a struggle when I'm with her, and I can tell she's just not present in the moment as she used to be. I can tell her priorities have really shifted, and as a result, I guess I feel neglected. I still love her, I'm happy for her, but at the same time, I'm wondering why her happiness comes at the cost of me being out the picture. Now, when I used to work in corporate, I did have other friends. We weren't as close as I was with Suki, but we were still good friends. We'd go out for cute lunches, complain about our bosses. One of them in particular was Beck, and she was a few years older than me, but literally was the nicest person on the planet. We used to get on so well in the office, chatting away to the point that our manager would have to scold us like we were naughty school children. However, I ended up quitting that job as I got a promotion there, but I never ended up getting the pay rise. So I was expected to work more but earn the same, which obviously didn't sit right with me. So when I left, we stayed in touch, but not as much as we used to. And then when I started my businesses, things got even more distant between us, and eventually we drifted apart. Same with all the other old work friends I had. However, when I became a business owner, I realized that I probably needed other business owner friends so that I had people that I could actually relate to. But making friends in this kind of industry at my age is a whole new playing field. And I'm not gonna lie, most CEOs are absolute assholes, which is probably one of the reasons why they're so successful, because they definitely put themselves first and they tend to view connections as transactions. And if you're not on their quote unquote level, they will not give you the time of day. I kid you not, it took me 3 years to find one decent CEO to be friends with, and that's Trish. Trish actually reached out to me through social media, and it was history from there. And as much as I love Trish, she's really busy, so getting a reply back from her can take a day or it can take 4 days, and I can't just spontaneously call her. And that's the thing when you're friends with other business owners, that's kind of the standard. You're not going to be able to hang out last minute. So yeah, that is where I'm at right now, where I just feel like I truly have nobody to talk to anymore the way I used to have it with Suki. The thing is, I've never dated anyone before, so I actually don't know if this is normal for friendships to change like this when there's a man in your friend's life, because the same thing happened with She Who Shall Not Be Named. And sure, maybe I could go off and date as well to fill the loneliness, but I've just never had any luck in that department. So right now my days are just filled with my own company, never leaving the house, and talking to ChatGPT for some interaction. Now I'm wondering whether I've taken back all my progress and reverted back to my kid self, the Larry. And I do lie awake at night thinking, am I going to have to deal with this for the rest of my life? Usually I like to end my videos on a really uplifting message, but to be totally honest right now, I'm just trying to navigate the stage of my life the best I can. I do try and find the silver lining, like I could look at it as an opportunity to work hard on my businesses and focus on personal development, reminding myself that my worth isn't tied to others. But yeah, Yeah, I'm just really going through it right now. And I'm mourning the version of me that did have someone that they could rely on. And that's not the case anymore. But to be fair, that's life. You're gonna have down periods like this where you're just really sad. And that's how I'm feeling right now. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. You just take each day as it comes.